Hello and welcome back to the Psych Legal Pop Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a therapist. I'm Tess Brigham, I'm the therapist.
And I'm Brooke Brigham, I'm the attorney.
And we are back here with Dr. Ashley Scolaro, we spoke with her last week. She is a PhD in neuroscience. And now that there is a verdict, if you've been living under a rock and you don't know, that there has been a verdict in the Karen Read trial. She was acquitted of all charges except for, they have a different name, I guess, in Massachusetts, OUI. It's DUI here, but OUI. And so we are going to talk about the verdict. Some jury members have come out and started sharing their opinions on the case, which was really fascinating. Both the Albert / McCabe's plus Michael Proctor have spoken out. Not what I would recommend. And I will say these people have learned nothing. They have not grown at all as people in this last couple of years. And then we're going to get into some of the legal issues that came out, and we'll go from there. So Brooke and I were talking about this. We were like, what was our prediction again? what do we think was going to happen? And I think mine was, I definitely didn't think they were going to find her guilty. I said, I thought it was either they were going to be hung jury or they were going to acquit her. Because I felt like from watching the second trial that they really streamlined the case and they really hammered home, and they had many experts go up there and say there was no collision. There was no collision. And I think that helped, because it's very much like, if there is no collision, we cannot argue about any of these other things.
Right.
Like she had no part of this if he never hit the car. And, so that was my prediction. I can't remember what anybody else's was.
I can't remember mine. I probably should have looked it up before we started this, but I remember feeling very worried, just worried that she was going to be convicted of like probably the lesser, involuntary manslaughter. But, trying to be positive about the reasonable doubt and just the whole ridiculousness of the story, the conspiracy kind of thing. But yeah. I don't know, what was yours, Ashley? Do you remember? You said it was going to be a mistrial, right?
Yeah. I was either a mistrial or that they would come back like the previous jury was talking about, which I think was involuntary manslaughter. I can't remember if it was that or OUI that they were on. But yeah, I'm surprised that we got to a verdict. I really thought it was going to be a mistrial. So
yeah. Well, and personally, I think we all feel like the jury got it right. I mean, very much so. I saw a few people saying, well, she shouldn't get an OUI. Then doesn't that mean everybody that night should get an OUI? It's like,
we're not talking, these people aren't being charged with anything.
And the other thing too, is she's admitted it. She admitted it. She said it. And this is what we said, that truly, and from the jurors that have come out and talked about, their thoughts, it seemed like they were very much on that same page of, well, she admitted she was drunk. I mean, and she did operate a vehicle. And yeah, there is proof of that. The other problem is there was no proof that there was a collision. So she can't run from a scene. She can't do anything, none of it makes sense. So I felt like they got it right for sure of what you can prove, what was provable, and what you had evidence for.
It's interesting because it's like, is the outcome different because of the jury? Is the outcome different because they got more serious about the evidence? I think in the second trial, the forensic evidence, they put much more of an emphasis on that. It's hard to tell. And this is the scary thing, because if it was just the jury and your fate is in the hands of who happens to show up that day, that's really frightening. And we were talking before we started about the makeup of this jury. People who were in the courtroom said that this was a younger jury than the last one appeared to be. They obviously don't have everybody's ages and whatnot, but the two people who have come out, the two jurors who have been on television, are pretty young, like 30, early 30s, mid 30s, maybe. I don't know. And people who are younger, because of the time that they've grown up in, they have much more of a distrust for law enforcement. And they know that cops set people up. They know that cops abuse people and beat people, and they've seen all this stuff. So it's not like it was, a long time ago when people believed cops just believed them.
Mm-hmm.
White people did. Okay.
Yeah.
It was a different experience if you're not white. But white people thought, well, what? The police are the good guys. Like
Mm-hmm.
they would never do something like this. They would never make this up or frame someone. And that's just not the case.
Yeah. It was also interesting to hear which of the witnesses were most effective. And one thing that I thought was fascinating was that I believe it was that juror 4 who was the former, and I'm going to say former, she's an attorney in Brazil, and she's here now in the US, and she's got 4 young kids, and she's kind of, in mom mode. So she's not practicing here. She was saying it was her and somebody else, the other juror that was talking, that they felt like the tow truck driver, Lucky, was a witness that they could really get behind because he was not being paid. He was, he wasn't for or against anyone. He was not being paid. And I think it was not juror 4, but maybe another juror who was a little bit like, listen, I grew up around here. These snow plows are huge. They absolutely, and you absolutely, when it's like that, are scanning hard. And that, people really believed him when he said there was no one there. There was no one there. And I thought that was interesting too, that for all of the money and time that they spent with all of these experts, that it's the people that are kind of not connected to any of it and their observations that really made it solidify something for them.
Yes, very true.
Yeah, and I think it was juror number, it might be 11. I think juror 4 and 11 are the two I remember talking. The woman
4 is Jason.
Okay, so 11 would be then the
Paula.
And then there was another one that didn't say her number or name, that just was quoted somewhere. But yeah, let me double check that it's juror 11. Yeah, she said they pulled all the taillight pieces out, and they just kept looking at the taillight video too. And that seeing that taillight light up, they were just like, there's no way that it's as broken at the scene as they were saying it was. They wouldn't say that it was a cover up because that's not what they were there to prove. They were really, I appreciated that about all of them too, how careful they were and what they were. I don't know if they got instructions about how Massachusetts handles that about talking to the media, because the jurors from the first trial, I remember being very seemed very media coherent, or some people just aren't as like careful with what they say. But she said they pulled the pieces out and were really focused on that. And when they were comparing notes on the witnesses, when I don't know if it was Yuri Buchanan, I think so, who said, I don't think that car moved when she backed up into John O'Keeffe's car and potentially broke her taillight. They just didn't find it believable, probably for lots of other reasons. Because it's hard to listen to.
Well, one of them said that Yuri, that I think it was Paula, who said, I was very close to him, and I could see when he was answering questions, he had fists. He was angry and he had fists. And that she thought she's kind of taking note of things. And I think that one piece of this is really important is, when someone walks in, you are taking note of absolutely everything. And so that meant something. And again, also, if I was in a therapy session and I had someone doing that I would point it out. I would think like, that's you're balling up your fist. You have a lot of anger here.
Psychologically, we really hone in on that. Like attention and memory research shows that we are really designed to see what emotions other people are displaying. So even if they weren't trying to read you're just going to naturally read that.
It's just energy. You just, you feel it. Yeah, I thought this jury was very thoughtful and very careful what they said, because the guy Jason, they were asking him questions. He was on TMZ, so of course TMZ is like, trying to get him to speculate about stuff. And at one point he just said, they only presented a limited scope of what happened that night. So I can't answer your question. So they're very cognizant that, they're tasked with this one thing, and they were really just did their job so well, I think.
Yeah.
We've only heard from a couple of them, but Jason also said that even starting out, well, throughout the deliberations, people change their mind, from the beginning of the deliberations. And he said it was a mix of some people by the end of it truly felt she was innocent, like purely innocent. And then others felt that the Commonwealth just didn't meet their burden of proof. And that, again, they all agreed that there was not a collision. That was the one thing. Nobody believed there was a collision that night.
Well, I've listened to Paula speak, and I think what's interesting about what she has to say in comparison to these interviews with the Proctors and Alberts, which is she talks about how when she first got there, day one, she thought she was guilty. I mean, again, because there's a
media coverage, and
and why would the Commonwealth go through all of this if they did not firmly believe that there was something there? Why would all of this be happening? So, and I think she very much felt like, God, there's got to be, when there's smoke, there's fire, right? There's got to be something to all of this. And she talked about that, and she talked about, and obviously in the beginning when the Commonwealth is presenting their case, it's very much what their side of it. But she said that as things went on, she also noticed that Karen was very confident and was laughing. And she said, I thought that turned me off in the beginning, because I felt like, why are you laughing? Why are you happy? This is terrible. And what happened was that as she started to learn more about the case, and as she heard more about it, she realized, like, oh, wait a second. She's like this because she's innocent. She's like this because she's confident in herself and what the truth is. And this is her truth, that she isn't scared. And it was just interesting to hear her talk about that, because as we see with these interviews with the Alberts and McCabes and Proctor, Paula in a 3-month period was able to really shift her perspective and see all of these different sides of things and then get to this conclusion. These people have been in this for 3 years, and they're still feeling they're victims. They're all victims. And I can get into that. I have like I've said, many thoughts about that, but just in terms of the jury, I was very impressed by her, by wow, you really, and you were willing to say that on a public forum. You're willing to say, listen, this is what I thought. And then I went here, and then this, and then it just, you're absolutely right, Brooke. It was very thoughtful. You could tell she was a very thoughtful person and took this seriously.
I wondered, in listening to that, how much those video clips, so I was worried that those were not going to be helpful for her because just of her demeanor, but I actually wonder if that's, when you compare Karen Reed, is she might not be very likable and things, but she doesn't come off as dishonest in anything that she's saying, I don't think. And I think that also probably was more helpful than even though the clips they played were potentially problematic, I think you don't get the sense that she's lying about stuff from listening to her.
Because the problem with Jen McCabe and all of these butt dials, and I threw away my phone because I needed a new phone. People know that is not, please, really the truth. But she owned the fact that, I probably shouldn't have been driving. I was drinking that night. I had a lot to drink. And one of the interviews, they asked her, were you mad at John that night? Yeah, I was mad. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't doing the whole oh, no, we were great. She was like, yeah, I was pissed. I was pissed because of this and this and this and this and this. And then this happened and this, right? So I had heard someone else talking about that too, if those clips, if those interviews with Dateline and the other news places that helped her or hurt her. And I think that in the end, it probably helped her in the sense that, she was willing to admit that she was drunk. She's willing to admit that they were in an argument. She's willing to admit these other things. So she's not, someone who is guilty but proclaiming their innocence. They are making themselves look as good as possible. So
she would have had some sort of alibi phone call, where she called him and said, "Oh, honey, what,
honey, where are you?
Where are you?" But no, she's calling him up, going, "I fucking hate you." It's that's real.
You pervert.
And the way she's acting at the scene is, I mean, you could also have somebody that's just in complete shock. So, but like when people are like, that's a ridiculous reaction, I'm like, she looks like, to me, people I've seen in stress responses, like,
Mhm.
that tracks. Even students, when they find out they're failing a class, they have those kinds of reactions, or you get the ones that are just completely stoic. But yeah, she seems believable. I wondered, the one thing, I don't know if we brought this up last time, but when the difference in this trial with the upcharge is Hank Brennan was really trying to point out that she was like jealous that John was going to leave her, and that really trying to sell that she was almost like it was first degree murder. He wasn't saying first degree, but just the way he was talking about, like, oh, she was so angry because he was slipping away from her and we're turning onto a street with her lover, and that just doesn't come off as believable, like,
No, and
at
it's
Because,
all.
you know, she's a
sexist.
woman, and God forbid
Yeah.
if a man doesn't love her,
She's
Well,
she's
gonna
she,
just
kill
gotta
him.
like throw her
yeah,
hands up and bury her head in the
Yeah.
sand and kill him and
Yeah.
back your car into him.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
So
think that
sexist.
they didn't fall. The jury didn't fall for that
No.
kind of sexist trope. Not at all.
Yeah. All right. Do we have anything else about the jury and other? Because it's mainly been those two jurors that have spoken
Yeah.
out. I think the person that was talking about Lucky and was maybe an alternate who was a little bit older. But again, I mean, even still, this person was like, yeah, I don't. No, you can't miss somebody. But I do think that is what you're bringing up, Brooke, is very, very real, and one of the pieces about the justice system that is, you know, again, I understand jury of your peers, but the problem is that we are complicated people and we have so many biases all the time that really truly the only way to, the sense that I get with this jury is this was a jury, maybe not everybody, but this was a jury that understood their biases. Paula told us all along the way, I had this bias because of this, and then I felt this, and then I realized this, and then, so that's the problem is that the bulk of the people in this world, we're all biased, but the bulk of the people don't think they are, and they're not willing to own their biases and what's going on, and that's a problem, and that's what's super scary about all of this. It's almost a little bit like if you're gonna have jury duty, you got to do like a week training on bias training, and like you know what I mean. And there's a little bit of like, maybe this is what we need to be doing with people, is like have a conversation with them about like what this means, because you know, we see things through our own lens, we see things through our world and all of that. If you know, I didn't grow up with snowplows, I didn't know that they would, that you are, you know, focused, that you can see that far, so it doesn't take much.
And I was listening to some lawyers talking about this, that, you know, they were saying that it kind of reminded them of Casey Anthony, even though this is a very different case. But, you know, if you're a attractive white lady, you know, it's like that missing white woman syndrome. Everyone freaks out, you know, it's like, oh my God, a white woman is missing. I mean, that would have been something that worked in her favor. I'm not saying that it did in this case, but just like you said, the biases. I mean, there's so many things happening, and it could be working for you, it could be working against you. You know, race always has something to do, and it's not just because. And when you say race is always an issue, you don't. Even if you're white, race is an issue, because the point that you're white, it gives you the privilege and a perspective and whatever. So there's so many things going on here, and then, you know, the law enforcement aspect of it, and God, this was so dicey. This whole thing was so dicey.
And you know, the research in Psych, looking at, usually it's at mock jurors that we're looking at, but because we don't usually get cameras in an actual jury deliberation, but attractiveness usually means they're more lenient towards you unless they think your attractiveness was part of your crime. So is it like, So where I could have seen that going wrong for Karen is, well, was she trying to get Brian and John to get in a fight, and that might have played into it for them, but I don't think that did. The other thing with the younger jury, when I teach forensic neuroscience and we do a mock trial, we do the West Memphis 3 case, which I'm not sure if either of you have heard about.
Oh
Oh,
no,
yeah.
I know this one.
Yes.
This is hands down one of the most heartbreaking
Yes.
cases, and it infuriates. I've seen all of them, and I get mad. I'm mad right
Mad all
now.
the time. So I use it because, even though it's got, you know, trigger warnings that I have to give them for sexual assault and murder of young children involved in it. Some law schools teach it as one of the classes about all these different aspects of, you know, false confessions possibly, and how do you treat minors, and what do you do with a crime scene, and lots of things. So the students start out by reading testimony. Like, I print out 700 pages, not every piece of testimony from that trial, but it's a lot of them. And they get randomly assigned on prosecution or defense. And it's just fascinating because before I have them watch the final West Memphis 3 documentary that shows out how the case turned out, which I do at midterm, the prosecution is always like, we got this in the bag. Like, there's no problem here. And the defense is worried. And then that video, that bias that video gives you just of what you learn in it and how the documentary film makes it, all of a sudden the defense is way too confident and the prosecution's way too concerned that they can't. And it's a mock trial. Like, we're not the actual thing. You're just pretending to be expert witnesses. So those 20 to 30-year-olds, like Court TV was saying, that's, you know, you got to be worried if you go out for looking for jurors in April and May because of that, because those college students could be there. And they do flip pretty easily, as I've seen their perceptions flip, and then not always good at recognizing their biases. And sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, and that whole thing of jury of your peers, I mean, these weren't you know, I mean, Karen Reed was someone who felt like an outsider, right? So are these her peers? You know, I think that's always such a tricky thing. I watched it a few times in different angles, in different ways. The actual moment where the verdict is read, and do you guys catch Yannetti like praying to God? Like, Yannetti closes his eyes and he's like, you know, he's solid the entire time and he's just waiting for those. It was just very interesting to see how each and Alessi's like looking, you know, at everybody. He's like looking, Yannetti's praying, and Alan Jackson's whispering to Karen. I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's such a nerve-wracking moment. Can you imagine?
Oh my God. Well,
I don't even think I'd be able to like stand up, you know.
Yeah.
I would just
it's your life. Yeah. Well, I also think, did we talk about this before, that maybe the Commonwealth shot themselves in the foot by overreaching? I do wonder if there was no second degree. If it was always like, hey, we do not think she meant to do this, but she did, if that would be different. Because I do think the overreaching hurt them too. Because it seems, even to me, it seems like, well, no. You know, I mean, to try, I mean, I think that they never had enough evidence for second degree, ever. And I think that shot them in the foot too, personally.
Yeah, I think in one of the Body in the Snow episodes, Yannetti taught, when Karen first called Yannetti and it wasn't the secondary murder, I think they had decided they were going to plea her out on that involuntary manslaughter. Maybe I'm wrong, but I remember him saying like, well, yeah, you're going to have to do some time or this or that. But, you know, this is common. It wasn't until it was an upcharge that he was like, wait, no, you're not pleading to that. That's a step too far.
I don't remember that.
Things changed. Sorry, but things changed when she got the upcharge. I think that's when she got Alan Jackson.
Yeah.
I think things got real. Yeah. Sorry, Brooke.
Yeah, because life in prison. I was gonna say, but this in this trial, they had the same issues they had in the first trial with the verdict forms. The jury was confused about the lesser included and how you have to find guilty on the, you know, the higher charge before you can moved down to we talked about this on the last episode. And I thought that was, that they still never solved that problem. That judge. And she was so, like, again, I think she was biased towards the prosecution because of those questions from the jurors, the way she handled that, the way just a lot.
It was.
Go ahead.
Well, and the jury noticed that. So Paula she said that they noticed that. And again, they're picking up on all of this stuff and they noticed it and it started to annoy them. It started to bother them. It was disrupting some of the testimony that they couldn't track because they kept getting interrupted. But also just, I think the defense kind of stopped even objecting at some point because they knew it was going to get overruled. So why even say anything? And I think they were noticing that. that. So again, Bev's conduct was not ignored. I mean, it was it was really obvious.
It was really bad. Obvious. It was almost like she'd become part of the prosecution.
Yeah.
She's like on their team, and that was very obvious. And it was very, and cops and prosecutors, it was just all just too friendly all over the place.
Yeah. I think in Massachusetts, a lot of people, I don't know that everybody is, but pretty used to hearing like what objection, hearsay, and that kind of stuff means. And since in Massachusetts, they don't have to say anything, they just object. I'm sure that has to irritate those jurors because in psychology, we have this thing called ironic process theory, which is that when you tell somebody they can't consider a piece of evidence, they actually focus on it more because it's like you're taking something away from me. Why can't, even though you're like, ignore that, like you can't do that. They're like, what? Why? So those objections from Hank Brennan, I don't remember if it was ARCA testifying, which ARCA person, but there were a few times where I was like, the jury has to just speak. Because at some point, couldn't the judge just be like, move on with your line of questioning instead of just the constant sustaining objections or sidebar, I guess. Maybe she did, but I was frustrated because I was like, I can't follow this train of thought. So it's interesting to hear the jurors talk about that for sure.
Yeah, because you get distracted with all the, like you said, your mind starts wondering, well, why is this so bad that it can't come in or whatever, and you're not even listening to what's happening.
Another point that I heard the jurors make, that one issue was that Hank did lose credibility when he had to admit, I made a mistake about the sweatshirt, that did really hurt him. And I think a lot of people were frustrated because the feeling is that this should have been mistrial immediately when that happened. Any other case, it would be mistrial. But in some ways that helped Karen, because they very clearly saw, this isn't what's going on here. And again, what was it? Someone said, it's like, it's a credibility, you've got two sides. Who's more credible? So when you have the Commonwealth come out and say, oh, I lied, or I made a mistake, or I wasn't paying attention, that is a huge problem. So, all right. I really, really am chomping at the bit. Sorry. Talk about the Alberts and the Proctor interviews. Okay. These people, let's start with the Alberts. Okay. These people are so tone deaf, and you can tell that they live in their little world and they have no idea what's going out around them, because this is Brian Albert's big complaint. Every step of the way, the criminal justice system has let them down, has hurt them and let them down. And he is incredulous about this. And I'm thinking to myself, you piece of shit, if you were black or brown, the system has only worked for you, Brian. You're mad that it stopped working for you. You're mad that it stopped. Everybody else, like, talk to a black person, a brown person, anybody about how fair the criminal justice system is. Piss me off.
Well, and how's he personally affected by the?
Because, I did see a video of him. He was at like the Galleria, the Boston Galleria, and someone was videotaping him. I don't co-sign this, but it was kind of funny, where they were like, "Ooh, there's Brian Albert. Are you guilty?" Like, the guy can't even eat a sandwich at the food court. People are yelling at him.
Good.
and making him feel like shit, right? Like, and again, he should be able to live his. I mean,
Oh, but Tess, if Karen Reed didn't kill John O'Keefe, then someone in his house
yes,
did, and he was there and he saw it. So I don't feel bad for him at all.
Okay, then
if people want to yell at him
at the
in the
mall,
mall, then I mean, yeah.
Okay, I'm with you.
I mean,
So,
especially after that interview where he says, like, I'm not a Canton police officer.
Yes.
I'm a Boston police officer.
Yes,
What am
yes,
I going to
yes,
do?
yes.
Well, that's your fallen soldier out there then
Yes.
on your team, number one. Number two, that's like a nurse being like, well, I only work for this one hospital, so I know you're having like a seizure, but I'm not going to do anything. Or a doctor doing that. Like, that's the absurdity of that. Like, what was I going to do? I was going to go out and put yellow tape up. And then he also says that the police came in his house, which I thought they said they never went in the house. So I was like, now this just is pointing to some sort, you're leaking out the cover up. The cover up is getting leaked out.
Yeah.
Anyhow, sorry.
They couldn't, no. They couldn't keep their story straight. They can't. And there's one moment in which Jen McCabe and Matt McCabe like whip their heads around and look at Brian, because I think they were like, oh, we didn't rehearse that.
Yeah.
Oh, he's ad-libbing. He's going out on his own.
He's going off script.
He's going off script. And the other thing is, I was going to comment on that, like, I'm a Boston police officer, which is ridiculous, which is, I would have taken, he said, John O'Keefe was I would have taken a bullet for him. No, you wouldn't have. You didn't even look outside your front door. There's cops everywhere outside. They were like, there's no footage of anyone even from the upstairs looking down going, oh, what's going on out there? No, I mean, he has no idea how he's coming across, and the privilege and and we can't live our lives now, and our lives are hard, and it's like, huh? And then they were like, well, we wanted to take the high road. We weren't going to say anything, and we're taking the high road, and we're doing this and we're doing that. And it's like, no, you're not. You people have never taken the high road ever. This is not you complaining now. And you complaining about how the justice system is not working for you, Brian Albert? That's not the high road. That's privilege. That's privilege, privilege.
I think it's getting all these court TV, and because I think that's who was interviewing them, a court TV person, or I don't know, maybe ABC.
I thought it was that guy, that Matt Gutman guy. That really kind of cute guy who's basically doing all the interviews. He's everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
The dark hair guy.
Too,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it's all these. From what I've been able to, I don't live in Boston, I live in Iowa, but from what I've been able to tell, trying to catch the actual local news there, I think they literally are in an umbrella of Karen Reed's super guilty, and we're like, nobody's, we're definitely not going to get implicated. I just think it's always come up like somebody's going to break, and we're going to find out what happened in that house. And I think we got closer by Brian Albert, even in that interview, saying something about he at least knew there were people out there and wasn't going to go out there. That's problem number one. And problem number two, Jen McCabe's in the house panicked. Why wouldn't she just like ring the doorbell or call to make sure they're awake and come out? Like, why did you burst into your sister's house if it's not to get him out to help? What were you doing there? And the police are in your house, and now we're hearing that, which we hadn't heard they were there that day, but he's saying
he stayed in his room. Yeah. If they were in your house, why'd you stay in your bedroom?
He also said, by the time I got downstairs, the police were in my house and John was gone. And it was a little bit like, well, how do you know that? You're upstairs.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, all of it. And I think anybody with like half a brain can figure out, like, everybody lost their Ring camera video. Everybody in that entire neighborhood, all of you, it's ridiculous. It's truly ridiculous.
They have the gall. Yeah. They have the gall to go on TV and say all these ridiculous things, trying to, I don't know, clear their names or whatever, get people to feel sorry for them. These people they're cuckoo crazy.
They're awful.
If they really think that this is working, that this is a good idea.
Which
Chloe, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no. Go.
I was just gonna say the Chloe of it all is driving me, their dog, because they bring that up in the interview about how ridiculous it is. They know where Chloe is the whole time. That's a whole side trail we didn't go down about No, we actually don't know where Chloe is because she's a very specific breed of German Shepherd. She wasn't microchipped, and the dog they're claiming is Chloe, they know isn't Chloe because she's not the same breed. We could go down that rabbit hole, so they've slipped up there.
Or you're
But
talking about where Chloe was that night, or
know that
Know
they
where she is
rehomed
now.
her. Like why? And they didn't explain why they rehomed her. They wouldn't, or at least they didn't get asked that question. But I don't know if I taught at a veterinary school neuroanatomy for about 7 years, and my sister's actually a vet. And one of the things I forgot to mention last time with the bite marks on his arm, I'm assuming, I guess it's a German Shepherd, but any dog would do this, which is those marks are, which my sister brought up. I forgot to even bring it. The marks that they make when they're going for a stranger are different than when they're going to like kill somebody. So like they're gonna grab your arms and your legs. They're not gonna go for your face and your neck, and they're doing that to pull you down. So they'll grab and let go, grab and let go, grab and let go, which is why there'd be so many, and they wouldn't be like deep enough to puncture, because she'd had in her residency, some of her co-residents got attacked by a dog coming out of anesthesia. They didn't have it placed like they should have, and went for her face because it was confused and going for a kill. And that's such a different injury they just hadn't seen before, because the way they bite is so different, that it's shocking that they tried to bring up, like, why don't you get the DNA from Chloe? Because I don't think they can even really do dog DNA to that kind of level to match it to a dog as well. Anyhow, that the Chloe of it all drove me it's just, they want to open that rabbit hole because now they have, and people can look into it, and we don't know where she is and why did you get rid of her?
Yeah. I mean, to rehome a dog is a pretty, I think any dog owner knows, is huge. To rehome your dog, I mean, that is a big decision. But that's so interesting when you talk about that, because there's always been this speculation of what really happened in the house. And if there was a fight, was Chloe attacking John, or was Chloe trying to maybe, and maybe she was trying to grab John's arm, and maybe John was trying to defend himself, or maybe John might have thrown the first punch. We don't know. We have no idea.
Or just walked in the house, walked up a flight of stairs. The dog came at him because it doesn't like strangers, grabbed his arm to pull it down, which is what they would do. Falls, hits his head. Could be that. I mean, like, could be a lot of things in that house, but
yeah.
We'll never know.
So the Michael Proctor interview, again, oof. And now people are, again, I don't like him, so I guess I can be mean. Everyone's like, somebody's been eating their feelings. Now, I didn't say this. I saw it on a TikTok. Now, I do not like to body shame, but Michael Proctor body shamed a woman. So I'm going to body shame you now.
True.
Somebody's been eating. Somebody's been emotionally eating. And it was fascinating because they went over the text messages, and he does take the stance, because I really walked into this like, okay, it's been a year later since I'm going to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. Here we go. I'm going to watch this. And at first he was like, well, no, he owns the fact that it was inappropriate. Those messages were inappropriate, but his reasoning for everything is really like, there's no sense of, you're absolutely right, I shouldn't have said these things. These are things that, I never in a million, obviously I didn't think they would come to the light of day, but you're absolutely right. They were mean. They were cruel. They weren't right, at all. But his defense of it is that we hadn't had a death in Canton in 20 years. I was excited. I was excited.
Just joshing around,
Yeah, and I was just kidding around with my friends, and I was just so excited. Like, that's not an excuse because there's a murder here. It's like, well, I was so excited. The movie was coming to the theater. It's ridiculous. And then they bring up well, she should just kill herself. That phrase. And he's like, it's just a turn of phrase. Maybe you should kill yourself. Maybe you should. I mean, really? That's a phrase that you use on a regular basis. Like, it's just a phrase, maybe, she should just kill herself. I don't really want her dead. And then And then the part that he is most upset about, the part where he is like on his knees crying, is when he learned he lost his job.
Yeah, of course.
That was the most distressing part of this entire experience for him, has been he lost his job. And he's sad, and he's, of course, appealing it. And Alan Jackson brought this up as well. This is another thing he said, which was a real beaut. They asked him, they said, hey, do you think that maybe you would have handled, if you could go back, would you have handled this case differently? Would you have approached this differently? He's like, well, no, not really, not too much. I mean, maybe I would have interviewed a few more people, or maybe I would have done this, or maybe I would have done that. Really sort of with this attitude of, again, the Alberts and Proctor are very defensive. Innocent people aren't this defensive. They're not.
Mm-hmm.
They want to explain themselves, but they're not this defensive. They don't feel like they will show you shades of gray.
Mm-hmm.
They will not be definitive on one thing or another. And they will have more thoughtful reasons for why I said this at this point. I said this at that point. This guy has learned nothing. He has learned nothing. He has not grown, except for his pant size, has not grown in this last year or 2 years or 3 years, however long it's been, then at all. Because, and you're just looking at this guy going, why are you doing this interview? Why are you doing this?
Why are any of them doing it? They think they're rehabilitating themselves here.
They're seeped in privilege. That's all I could think with the Michael Proctor. Well, and the questions the guy was asking, I was just like just save your tears. You should have been fired. So should Yuri Buchanan for being part of that, and then being like, this was the best investigation with honor and integrity. It's like, no. Imagine in any other profession, like I've got a group chat going with my colleagues in the psych department, and we're talking about a student who plagiarized, which would be problematic for us to be doing that on text, just like it's problematic for him to be doing that. And we were saying these kinds of things about this student that we think might have plagiarized, like, holy, like, no. And we're not even supposed, I don't even know that we're held to the same standard as a police officer should be. I mean, we're held to pretty.
But if that happened and you got caught, I would assume that everyone would be like, you know what, you're absolutely right. We are really sorry. We shouldn't have done this. This was wrong.
I'd only cry if I lose my job. That would be it. Otherwise, I would not be apologetic about any of it. No, yes, of course. Well, you'd own it, right? Like, of course you would. Like, I wouldn't. I definitely would be doing TV interviews. If I was doing anything, I would be like, I am so sorry. This is completely, here's the trainings I'm doing or whatever to make up for this. Not like, it was perfect. I'd do that again. Hands down.
Yeah. Oh. Because honestly, basically Proctor really in his own way was basically saying, I'm sorry I got caught. I'm sorry I got fired. But the rest of it, no. And so that tells you who he is. That tells you who he is. Brian Albert getting defensive and saying, defending himself and mad that people are mad at him for not running out the sign, the defensiveness of I'm a Boston cop but not a Canton cop, like all of it. It's just none of it's making you all look good. But I think I don't think anything's going to happen. They may leave. I mean, maybe the one sort of thing is they finally leave and they get out of this area and they can finally be free of these Alberts. But I don't think any of these people are going to spend one moment of time anywhere.
I had to keep
in prison
stopping that. I think it took my husband. I was like, okay, you're going to sit and watch this with me because you watched the Body in the Snow thing and you've watched me watch this trial. I had to keep stopping it. I couldn't listen to the questions that they were asking Michael Proctor. And at one point, earlier on before they got to Proctor, they had that man and woman, friends of John O'Keeffe.
Yes. And I know who you're talking about. That were also in Body in the Snow. They were good friends of his who firmly believe that Karen did it.
Karen did it. But then they also said, and Karen wasn't at the funeral and has never visited the grave. I'm like, they put in an order saying she couldn't be there.
Yeah, there was a restraining order.
You think for a minute she's going to go do that? Absolutely not. Like, and they're like, she could have gone in the middle of the night. Really? Like, I bet they've got cameras there watching. They would not in a minute stop that. That drove me nuts. And then getting to the Proctor, Yeah, I had to keep stopping and starting,
Yeah.
and it was awful.
Well, I felt like with the friends, because I remember those friends from the from it, and I think with them, I think what's so hard about their position in all of this is all they know is they had this friend and the friend is gone, and it is just, I think it's easier for them to just be like, yeah, Karen Reed did it,
Right.
than to have to like zoom out and go, well, maybe something else happened. And I think that what's so this position that Karen's in is that she's defending, she's fighting for her life, she's defending her life. And yes, part of that is that you've got to defend yourself, and maybe some things are going to come out about the victim that aren't great, and that maybe don't make them look very good, because we're human and we all have these things. And so I think for that, the friend that loves this person and is now the friend is dead, and so now you've put this person on this pedestal, just the idea of someone saying anything negative about John, I think they're so, again,
Yeah.
I don't think that I think their stance is it feels to me very different than the Alberts and the McCabes, who certainly it feels like something's going on there.
Mhm.
But for them, it just feels like they are like, my friend is gone and someone's got to pay.
Yeah.
And I'm so mad. Who do I be mad at? And they just need to be mad at her.
Yeah, and
So.
like the state, obviously the state of Massachusetts is not going to go after any of these people, because that would be like saying, oh, we prosecuted the wrong person, or with this,
Yeah.
we tried to
Knowingly.
prosecute this. Yeah, we tried to prosecute this innocent woman. But I'm sitting here wondering if maybe there could be some federal charges that come out of this. Not quite sure what, having to do with the Alberts and the, just the investigation. And I can't remember what came of the federal investigation of the investigation of the investigation.
Well,
got
it's
that they
shut
were
down.
ended.
doing.
I thought
Yeah, so
it got cut because the
Yeah.
new administration came in and said, we're cutting all this stuff, so we don't have the money to investigate this stuff, and it got cut. The
but
investigation got closed.
it could come back though,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
if it were just cut
In
because
4
of the
years,
money.
with a new administration or something like that.
Yeah.
But I will say that, if this family has been untouchable, and if this police force has been as corrupt as people are saying, it does, chip away at it. It does make it seem like you're not invincible. You're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
people are watching. People are
yeah,
watching you
and
now.
people are really watching you now. And maybe you just can't get away with the same stuff. But the other thing, and I think Brooke and I we might have talked about this when we first talked about Karen Reed, is I also think, again, this is an example of, imagine if Karen didn't have any money.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if Karen did not have the resources. Imagine if she was not educated. Imagine if she was black or brown or any, right? Like, there are some things. I think that she won this because she had money,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
she had
she
the
had
money
the
to fight
best.
it.
She had one of the best lawyers in the country, who's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean,
And she had a
yeah,
dream team.
yeah, she has a dream team, and she fought very hard
Mm-hmm.
because that's just her personality. Like, but yeah, if you have someone who's, you know, less educated, younger, minority, who doesn't have that kind of confidence or that
Mm-hmm.
kind of, I mean, she has a hell of a lot of, she's a fighter.
Yeah.
Her whole demeanor, she's a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, this could have gone very poorly.
Yeah.
It's just the cash to bond out. I mean, how long people can stay in jail
Yeah.
waiting for trials, or years and
And
years.
so, and sometimes all they need is like a couple $100.
Yeah.
But they do not have that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're spending years in prison, in jail.
Yeah, and like that documentary that she did, with her team, look how much time they spent together. And that's the hard part about being in custody and trying to defend yourself, is she met with her lawyers for hours upon hours, days upon days, in preparation for this trial. You can't do that if you're incarcerated.
Yeah.
They put you in a little room and maybe give you a couple hours. Like, they're supposed to give you, whatever time, but they can't. The staff, they're just not set up for that. So that's a huge
Yeah.
That's a huge factor.
Yeah.
They rented out that half of a hotel, and made it like
Yeah.
this.
Well,
war
and the fact that
related.
it took on a life, the case took on a life of its own. If it didn't gain all this traction, I mean,
Mhm.
again, I got the sense that Alan Jackson and Yannetti, these are decent people. So I think they saw this and were like, we're not going to leave you. But what if after the first case, mistrial, and what if there wasn't such publicity? Would they have gotten a lessee? Would they have gotten, because as we talked about before, these people are working for free at this point.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
got to be worth it for them
Right.
to do this.
Yeah.
And
No,
again, that's privilege within that Alan Jackson has the privilege himself to be able to not
Right.
have to earn money, directly from this for a while. All of these men, everybody
Yeah.
on the team.
Well, yeah, the public display of support really did help.
Mm-hmm.
It really did. And all those people outside of the courtroom, they're the ones who drew attention to this, to the rest of America.
Yeah.
Like, I remember the first time I heard about this, I'm listening to a radio show or a podcast, something, and someone starts talking about this case. They're saying this case is wild. Like, a Boston police officer is found dead on another Boston police officer's lawn, and they're trying to frame
Mm-hmm.
his girlfriend. And I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
This would not have. My friend Jenny, who lives in Massachusetts, hadn't even heard of the Karen Reed case until she listened to our podcast,
Wow.
which I couldn't understand. But how could you not? Like, it's just, it was everywhere,
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, that did help her. And think of it now, talking about the money. This guy, Jackson, he's now gotten Kevin Spacey acquitted and Karen Reed. He's probably going to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
This guy.
Yeah, he's the guy to hire. If
He's the
you've
guy.
got money and you get in trouble, you hire Alan Jackson. Just like that guy that got Casey Anthony and Aaron Hernandez
yes.
off in Miami. Who was that guy? That
Jose
guy I would hire.
Baez.
Yes.
Jose Baez, yeah.
Yes. So that guy, if you get caught with anything in the state of Florida, he's your guy.
Mhm.
So yeah, this and Yannetti and all that. So did you guys find out here that Yannetti and Alessi are BFFs?
Oh, I did.
And they are so thrilled that they're BFFs now, that they met each other. Like, they're like, even in our 50s now, in our 50s and 60s, we made a best friend. I was like,
oh,
okay.
You mean they became BFFs?
They became BFFs.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
And they consider each other a really, really good friend. And they're so happy to have met each other later in life.
Oh,
I was like, oh, dear
nice.
God. Like, this is just all this love.
Well, he was involved in did you say Kevin Spacey? You might have already said that, but
Yeah,
also Phil
yeah.
Spector. So I know
that's
there's
right.
some very problematic things about Alan Jackson. We can grow and
he
change.
defended Phil Spector?
Yeah, and he said some
interesting.
pretty awful things. For some reason, I thought it was Harvey Weinstein. I don't know why, but yeah, Phil Spector is the one.
Well, that's the thing. Everyone deserves a defense, and that makes it even more impressive that he can get acquittals for some people who are not, who are pretty smarmy. And that's the thing, that's what people don't understand about defense attorneys when they say, how could you defend these people? There's that. If it were not for vigorous criminal defense attorneys, we'd have even less rights, because it'd be even easier to convict people and convict innocent people. Those lawyers are what sort of keep the prosecutors and the cops at least semi-honest.
Yeah.
Because they know that if you go in court up against Alan Jackson, you better have dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's as a cop or a prosecutor, because he'll take you down.
Yeah.
So that's important, and you can't focus so much on the actual client and what they did or whatnot. This is how the justice system is supposed to work.
Mm-hmm. That everyone gets their fair day in court. Like, that's what all of this is about.
It's this, and upholding the integrity of the system.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the defense attorneys aren't going to, it's just going to be corrupt. It's going to be this corrupt system of courts and cops and prosecutors, and so yeah.
Well, yeah, and you would think it would also be the judges, but as we saw in this case, sometimes the judges are just as
judges are just as bad. Sometimes judges are worse, because you take someone who now has some power.
Yeah.
You give people power, and a lot of times they go crazy with it. So
Yeah, our father, who's also an attorney, he always has these feelings about judges. He always thinks that people that like become judges are sort of giving up. He always
Yeah,
felt like his whole thing was like, yeah, because you can't handle it. You cannot handle being in court,
being in the trenches.
being
Yeah.
in the trenches. You can't defend yourself. You can't do this. And it is interesting because yes, if you are a criminal defense attorney and yeah, you got to be on the top of your game. That's how you're able to make a living. But if you're in a judge, yeah, you can rest a little bit. Like your job isn't it's very different when your job is dependent on every single day what you're doing versus I can be like this day and I can be like this. I can have a bad day. It's all good. I'm fine.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
look, just like anything else, there are good judges and bad judges. Some judges are very thoughtful and do their
mhm.
research and take it very seriously, and some don't.
Yeah.
Some are just god awful,
Yeah.
and they get appointed not because they're even qualified. It's a political
Yeah.
appointment.
As we've
So,
seen in our
yeah,
country.
all
Yeah.
the way up to the Supreme Court, all the
Yeah.
way down to the lower courts. And, fortunately in California, we have a thoughtful governor who appoints, um, good people to the bench. But like a lot of these federal court, um, not just the Supreme Court, but the federal court picks justices that have been appointed by Trump.
Mhm.
Scary. But anyway, didn't mean to go political.
Yes.
No, well, it
Well,
is political, and I'm just wondering why it is that way because most other profession, I mean, there's always politics at work and stuff, but it is really odd that the judicial system is so tied to and that you've got so many
Hmm.
politicians that are former attorneys. Um, but I think it's interesting that you say your dad said, "Oh, they can't handle it," because that's very much what I get from other scientists. Like, well, you couldn't handle doing real science. That's why you're teaching. I'm like, no, I actually like teaching. That's why I'm here. Um, but that's an interesting perspective on some
Well, our
judges.
dad's a little bit crazy when it
y-
comes to
I mean, Brooke, you would
some.
know better than I. Isn't this how because every time I would ask him, like, have you ever thought about being a judge? No, never. So that's his stance. Like
Because
any
he
other
wa- he
profession.
likes he likes to fight. He
Yeah.
doesn't want to be the neutral party. He wants to be on a side and fight and win.
Hmm.
He likes winning.
Well, and also judges have to follow certain rules and judges have to, right? They have to be fair. They have to be impartial. They have to listen to
Hmm.
both sides. And yeah, for him, he's just like, no, I don't want to listen to anybody. I don't want to listen to your rules. I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to listen to anything. So that's the other part of it is like, he doesn't like authority. So I think a judge is
He's a
authority.
bit of an outlaw,
Yes, he
but
is. But anyway,
yeah. So
uh,
no, that's I hate it when people say that about teaching because you can't teach somebody something if you don't know it.
yeah,
If
Well,
you don't know it inside and out.
it's like
yes,
being those expert witnesses. The best expert witnesses are ones who've got teaching experience, I think, because they
yeah,
can. We don't get into the juror instruction issue where you're in all legal speak, and these aren't lawyers, so like they don't even when they were like reading the verdict, right? They were the foreperson on the second count
Mm-hmm.
was like not guilty, and the judge and the court clerk or whoever was like, wait,
Mm-hmm.
what? Are you sure that's what you mean? And he's
My
like, yeah,
God.
not guilty. And they were like, of all the charges? And he's like, well, guilty of this charge. And so it was like a whole little back and
yeah.
forth that I was just like, see, the form is problematic, people.
Yeah, that was a mess.
Well, there's
But
teaching. I mean, teaching is, I think that what people don't recognize a lot of times until you're in it is how much teaching skills you need in so many other jobs. Like my job requires a certain amount of teaching. If I'm doing like I used to work in drug and alcohol, that's you basically are leading groups. You have to give people instructions. Like this is the exercise we're doing, and then we're doing this, and then this is happening, and right, like so you have to be able to explain things. You have to be able to keep things moving and entertain people because people get bored, right? Like there's a tremendous amount of skills in that. But unfortunately, again, I mean, it's misogyny. It's because it's been more of a female profession. We treat it like
mm-hmm.
it's shit. I mean, again, this is how we do with anything that is soft skills. We see it as, not good enough, so we're not going to pay you. So, anywho.
Oh, that's a whole nother,
Yes.
a
Okay.
whole
Was there
nother
anything
show.
else that we have not talked about? Anything in the Karen Reed world that anyone wants to say?
I think the the civil trial, I don't remember if they've already filed that or not,
I think
but
so, yeah.
it's a lower burden, obviously. Well, I guess that's okay. So two things. So one, I think Hank Brennan in this trial did a bad job of talking about reasonable doubt, because one of the jurors was saying, unless it was 99.9% sure that she was, or like 100% sure she was guilty, then it's not, then there's reasonable doubt. It's like, no, it's not beyond all doubt. So I wonder how much the prosecution kind of messed that description up, because that juror was like, if you're not 100%, then you have to acquit her. It's like, well, no, that's not
Yeah,
not
I
the
wonder
standard.
what the instruction was on that, because there's been case law that says that, in a closing argument, a prosecutor cannot, or a defense attorney either, cannot use that numbers. Like,
Right.
you're not supposed to say 93%, 95, 99, whatever. So I wonder if that instruction was given at all, or if that's just something that the juror came up with in their heads from just watching television and
Yeah.
reasonable doubt and that kind of thing. That's
Because
interesting.
I mean,
Well,
yeah.
but that's part of, I think, why Hank Brennan was a terrible choice, because he was a defense attorney. And so, like, right? That's what he was known for, as being a defense attorney. Like, I think they thought, okay, the defense attorney on the first case seemed to be really good. So let's pick a defense attorney and then have him switch sides.
Yeah,
And then
maybe.
he can prosecute the case. But I think that that's what you're talking about, is I think that Hank Brennan really thought in those ways. He didn't think like a prosecutor. He thought like a defense attorney.
Yeah, didn't
So,
explain that. Yeah, because
yeah.
one of the first things we do in my forensic neuroscience class is when we start talking about courtroom stuff, as we talk about where would you put the number of beyond reasonable doubt, and some of them put 100%, which I'm like, again, but very few of them put below like 99% until we start talking about things. But separately, with the civil trial, it's preponderance of the evidence in Massachusetts too, I'm assuming. So it's just more likely than not that this happened. But they also can bring in a whole lot. Like, they compel? Don't you have to testify in civil trials?
I think she has to get a deposition.
Subpoena.
Yeah.
And I believe there's some not great stuff about things John O'Keefe said about not wanting his mother to have custody of those kids, or his sister saying that the mom shouldn't have custody of the kids, that I don't think they want coming out. And I don't know how much else they can pull in. I don't know. Like, people are comparing it to the OJ trial, like OJ then lost in civil court, and Karen could lose in civil court. I just wonder, with so much more things that could come in, whether that.
But the premise is the same. They still have to prove that she killed him.
And that there was a collision.
That there was a collision,
Yeah.
that she caused his death. So that, again, you start even forgetting all the other stuff. Because what you're saying about the I don't even know if that would even be able to come into evidence. It's not really relevant about the children, living with her or not, because basically you have to prove a death occurred, this person caused this person's death, and then it becomes just damages. Okay, how much was this person's life worth? And they go through a whole thing, like, if you're looking at, I mean, you can have punitive damage, but a lot of it is like, okay, how are you economically damaged by the fact that this person is dead? Like, were they supporting you? Did you depend on them? Stuff like that. It gets kind of cold after that. But no, it's going to be a complete, at least in the beginning, it's going to just be the same trial. Did she kill him? And then it turns into something totally different.
And I think, obviously, I hear you about the OJ thing, but that was I mean, there was so much evidence with OJ, and it was really about something else. Like, he was acquitted because of, as we know now, for other reasons, other than whether or not people thought he did it or not. And one thing that and I think that, again, they did such a good job of, like, no one ever hit him, that I could see her beating this, but I could see it going either way. What I'm wondering is, Karen have any recourse in all of this? Can Karen sue? Can Karen do anything to say I was set up and I have no home now and I'm broke? And
she could sue for malicious prosecution.
okay.
But that's tough to do,
Mhm.
because the DAs get a lot of protection. The prosecutors get a lot of protection. They have to, otherwise everyone's
Yeah.
going to be suing them. So it's a very, very high bar to meet, but maybe it could be met in this case.
Mhm.
Maybe because they just couldn't see the forest for the trees. They were just so focused on, this law enforcement aspect of it.
Mhm.
So yeah, she could. I don't know if she will, but she could file a lawsuit and maybe get a settlement or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
So
just
it'll just
wondering.
go
But I mean, I
away.
can also understand because I saw an interview with her the day after. And this guy was asking her questions. She was answering, but they were asking, like, well, how do you feel today? And what are you going to do? And she's like, yeah, I'm just trying to process. I didn't think I was going to be here today. I'm just trying to
Wow.
process all this. But they were asking, like, do you think you're going to go back to teaching? And she's like, I really miss it, but I don't think I can go back. That's the other part of it too, is there's a part of me that's like, what are you going to do now? I mean, yeah, maybe she could be a legal, she could maybe spin this into some kind of legal commentator kind of like YouTube podcast. She's probably going to have a podcast show, something like this. But I don't know if that's really who she is and what she wants to do. I mean, I think, so I wouldn't blame her if she decided to sue because you've taken everything from her. She has her freedom, which is what she was fighting for, but now she's got to rebuild her life.
Yeah.
And her parents. I mean, I assume the parents have been helping her too. So
yeah, I heard she had to. I mean, she went through all of her savings, all of her retirement savings. She had to sell her house and move in with her parents, and
knowing the
parents
fact
are
that she's a single woman, no kids, I'm sure she had a lot of money and she's in finances. I bet you anything. This is the kind of person who probably had at least $500,000 somewhere sitting in a bank account. Unlike us parents that are like, how am I going to pay for this? I don't know. But I mean, so I think and she sold her home, right? And I'm sure the parents did too. So
Yeah.
Anywho.
I mean, I think about her, just the years with her having MS on top of just the tragedy of the significant other's death, that I wonder how much this has really progressed her MS. I don't know what subtype she has, but I imagine she looks much thinner than she even did a year ago. I can't imagine how that's affected her. So I think about that too, that it's just not just the money, it's the stress of that.
Yeah.
She's
Time.
got a
toll on
disease.
her.
Yeah. And I can also understand her being like, I want to be done. Like, I don't want to spend another day in a courtroom. Like, I'm going to move on. And she's obviously very, she's bright. She's got a degree. She's got all these things she can rebuild for sure. But she's not 25, she's 40 something. So, but anywho, the jury got it right. I'm very, very happy that they got it right. It feels like, okay, good things can happen. There's good in the world. Okay.
Well, this has been quite a case, quite a ride.
What are we going to follow now?
What's next? I know. I was just going to say, what's in the pipeline?
Yes, Ashley, what do we got?
Okay,
other than
Kohlberger's
Diddy,
coming up.
that's true.
Kohlberger,
Brian
the
Kohlberger.
Idaho.
I don't know. For some reason, this case does not fascinate me. I think the way it fascinates other people. I don't know why. Why do you find it fascinating, Ashley?
So I don't know. Well, it happening on a college campus is interesting, I suppose, but I don't know that I haven't followed it very closely, but I think what makes it particularly interesting is that the suspect here was in either criminal justice or some sort of form and had written papers where he seemed to be planning some sort of murder like this. So I'm not sure, but I know a lot of people are very fascinated by it, and there's a lot of tragic deaths on a campus, and the campus destroyed that building that
the house.
Yes, which I understand. Like, on the university side, I can totally see why we're like, we got to we can't have this on campus. It could be people visiting that house from other places, but also like why there's a crime that happened there. Anyhow, I'm not sure.
Evidence.
But yeah, that one, I know is coming up, but
What about the Gilgo? The Gilgo Beach.
oh yes, I don't know when that's happening. Aren't they still uncovering? I think they're still
Yeah, I think they're
uncovering
still
stuff.
finding bodies.
So sad.
But
That's
there
a
is
creepy
another
case.
Boston case that's
Oh,
happening. There is another case in
oh.
Boston, and I think it has to do with Canton police again. And I think it was about a young girl who was, dare I say, murdered or suspiciously
Allegedly.
died, who was part of that Young Ranger program.
Mhm.
So I guess each of these police districts, they have this like young
Mhm.
person getting involved and being a police officer.
Learning about, yeah.
And
law enforcement.
apparently, because I've listened to a few podcasts about it, apparently this is another way for especially young women to be taken advantage of, which is, these men who run the programs.
I know someone who this happened to their daughter.
Really, and was
She-
like they groom them. Wow.
Yeah, she was having a relationship with one of the, he's probably at least 10 years older than her. She was still a minor at the time.
Wow.
And she actually told her therapist about it, and the therapist had to report it. And that's how her parents found out. That's how the police got involved. The guy was arrested. And ultimately, and then she turned 18 and like they still wanted to be together. I don't know. I don't know what ultimately ended up happening. But yeah, so to hear you say like that's a thing, like that's scary.
It is, because I've heard of a whole other case. There was one guy who was rampantly, and it's also like these people that they catch. It's like they're having these inappropriate relationships with young women. They're also like scamming this. They're taking money from here. Like it's never just one thing. It's they're acting out in all these different ways. And I think that what we're talking about is, right, comes back to this whole idea that we've been talking about this forever, which is police reform. We got to approach this differently, that we need that I think unfortunately there are a lot of police out there that really do care, that are doing a really good job, that do want things to be better, and they do care, and these other people are making them look bad. But this is a job with way too much power. Any job where you have this amount of power over people
And you carry a gun.
you should absolutely, like, there has to be so many more checks and balances.
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like for my profession, there's so many like checks and balances that I have to go through constantly, and I'm not allowed to have a gun. So, I mean, it's just, but again, I understand it, because you should, as a professor, as an attorney, like, yes, you should,
I mean, prison reform as well. Both of my parents worked in prisons. My mom is a nurse and my dad is worked in why can't I think of it? They don't call it the kitchen, but whatever he was the one that would like check out the knives to people and supervise them as they ate. And they're both medium high security prisons, but they would talk about, their views on the trainings they would have to do were really biased, but also terrifying, because they'd show you like, here's all the shanks that the prisoners can make.
Yeah.
But then my mom's seeing like people coming in and dying before their sentence is up, or fights, or they're not allowed to get certain medications, or they get there when they're too sick. And then my dad seeing some people with some pretty psychotic behaviors in the kitchen. But also he didn't have a gun in his job. There was like someone, I don't know, that had a shotgun watching that area, but he didn't have a gun, but still apparently enough. I don't know how he did that job. That would terrify me that he was working there doing that. So,
boy, I bet they have some stories.
Yes, get your parents on. Hey,
I have a lot of stories from them. Yes, but that's another sidetrack. But their point was always prison reform needed to happen, because a lot of these people especially my dad, because they were working, that they were probably very different than when they went back to their cells, because they actually felt like they had a purpose and
we did the Yes. Check out our episode on quilters, which was a great, which was a documentary about these prisoners who are making quilts for kids in foster care.
Children.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's so many levels to all of this in terms of, right, the kinds of people that end up. I mean, we just see everybody as the same. We just like, okay, everybody that's committed this kind of crime, let's all throw you all in. And if you're over 18, or this whole thing about trying kids that are 16 as adults, I mean, that's a whole other ball of wax. And we are correcting some of these things, as we see with the Menendez, and like, right, some things are changing, but we have got to look at this differently. We just have to, or nothing in our world is ever going to change. And it's this weird thing where people are they're so worked up about being in prison, and you can just like, do yoga, or you can just, I don't want to pay for that. It's just like, calm down. People just get so incredulous. This idea of, I don't want my taxes to let these people have any kind of life. It's like, okay, you want to see them. If you ever want to meet them outside of prison, maybe you should pay for the yoga class.
Yeah.
So all of it. Anyway.
Okay. Well, we'll
get into this.
We will be back with Ashley when we get into the next exciting case, whatever that may be. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your expertise.
Thank you with all your info. Anything that you want to share with people? You want to plug anything or?
Nope. Okay. Nothing to plug. I mean, I may have something coming up that we've talked about previously, but nothing to announce or anything right now. So,
all right. Well, thank you again for being here. And if you enjoy our show, please follow us. Please subscribe to the podcast. Please give us a 5-star rating and review. We're now here on YouTube. Hello. You can go check out our YouTube channel, go follow us on social media. And if you want more content from us, come to our Patreon. We do a weekly bonus, and then we do a couple other things for our higher tiers. So please go check us out there. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Ashley, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.